Welcome, everyone. Glad you are joining us. We've got 4 minutes before we start. So as you log in, we are so excited to see people join. There's some fun questions we've got here. Participate in the chat today with us. We want to know, for those who are on, where are you from? Ping us in the chat. Let's see where you guys are coming in from. Fun question that's themed with us. What's your superpower? If you could have a superpower, what would it be? Make sure you guys throw that in the chat. And we're excited to see, Alex and I were excited to see what that would be. Alex, what would be your superpower if you could pick? I know that's a hard one, but what would you pick?
I would love it if I could get all my rest in 30 minutes of sleep.
Ooh,
I think sleep is a waste of time. I don't know. I'm one of those people. And so if I could just 30 minutes done, it's an 8-hour kind of nap.
I
would totally love that.
I love it, guys. So for those who are just joining, Alex and I are just chatting about some of the questions that we've got here to kind of get us started. Alex is saying his superpower would be power napping, whole night's rest in 30 minutes as his superpower. Honestly, I think I would want the same. I don't like to sleep. I think it is a waste of time as well. So I might be the same as you on that one because it's just can't get stuff done. I want to go. I want to go do something.
Yes. So, and I used to say super speed because then I could do my work in half an hour, but then realized that I have to actually wait for the computer to keep up with me.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. Exactly. That would definitely not work because your computer wouldn't do it. So guys, we're so excited for everyone who's joining us right now. Please participate in the chat. Oh, I see we've got some people already coming in. This is so exciting. So
great.
Love to see it. Oh, we've got Philly, we've got Madison, Wisconsin. Okay, we've got some Oregonians in here, LA, Texas, guys from Seattle. This is amazing. I love it. Please, as you join, please keep throwing in Valencia, California, San Jose, California. This is great. Please keep throwing in where you guys are from. We love seeing everybody's there. Oh, we've got Ontario, PDX. We've got New York, Tennessee, man, Lebanon, awesome, Ohio. This is so great, guys. Love seeing it. Australia. Alex, you get points for logging in at 4 a.m. to join us today.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, this is great. So yeah, guys, we're so excited you're here. Please throw in your chat. Where are you from? If you could have a superpower, throw it in as well. We'd love to see it because this is just going to be a great one. I want to see what it is. Alex and I have agreed power napping, a whole night's rest in 30 minutes would be the best one, so we can be so productive. Zip through. We've got a couple people from BC, guys. Thank you for joining us. Okay, super strength. I like it. Oh, nice people. Well, I like that as a superpower. That would be really great if everybody was nice. I love that. This is awesome, gang. Okay, we've got a minute more. We're gonna let people keep joining so that we can keep going. There's some great tips in here, guys. I love some of these Photoshops, bracket keys. I think these are great. Oh man, eating ice cream without a brain freeze. Leslie, I think that is a great superpower. I would eat a lot more ice cream because I could do it so much faster, right? And then if Alex didn't have to sleep, we could eat ice cream more often. Right?
See, that's not wasting time. Does Iceman get brain freeze when he eats ice cream?
I don't know. Right?
Or Mr. Freeze?
Mr. Freeze?
Does he get brain freeze when he eats ice cream?
Or does it get extra freezing? Right? Because does he freeze it back up? Maybe he can I don't know. If he does a milkshake, what happens, right?
You can't. It freezes.
He just freezes it. Awesome. Okay, gang, we are at the top of the hour, and I am so excited to see everyone here. Yes, so if you have any questions around how you're viewing us right now, there is a on your top panel of the Zoom or bottom, depending how your display is, it gives you an option for how it's displayed. There will be the way that you can just see the panelists, so you can see my screen here as we talk about it. And then we will be showing Alex's camera here in a second, and we'll be turning off it. So welcome. everyone who's here. I love everybody who's joined in so far. If you haven't thrown in where you're located, if you haven't thrown in your superpower or any of your tips, please do. We're going to be using the chat a lot today. It's going to be a great conversation. So as we get started, you are here at Learn Superhero-like skills for your creative workflow. I am Lindsay Reynolds. I'm the Director of Enterprise here at Wacom Technology, and I am so excited to have Alex Sinclair on with me. Alex is a artist. I don't know if I would call you a fan of ours, or like we're a fan of you, or someone we've been working with for so long. You're almost really more of an honorary Wacom employee at this point, right? Because you just have been so crucial for us being a part of things. He's been an artist of ours at Comic-Con and all sorts of different things. He's a specialized colorist. Alex, I'm going to just tell you a little bit more about your background, if that's okay, before we kind of kick off. You are a freelance artist who works in the comic book industry as a colorist. You've been doing this for almost 30 years, it looks like, and you've done Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, some independents, and you've worked on Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Darth Vader, Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn. You've worked with Jim Lee and Scott Williams. I mean, you've worked with pretty much everybody in the industry. And your projects with Venom and Brian Hitch, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Darth Vader are all award-winning. I mean, like, we're so honored that you're joining us today. So thank you.
Very nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been it's one of those kind of pinch yourself every now and then, because it's like, I'm working on, coloring Chewbacca today. It's like, who would have thought it? And so it's those moments don't escape me, and I'm always grateful. And then, I've been using Wacom products ever since they kind of got introduced into the market. They were lifesavers for those of us that had to color using a mouse. And so I think I spent more time with my Wacom than I do with my kids now.
I think probably a lot of people on this call can say the same thing, right? A lot of the artists on this call are probably saying the exact same thing. Yeah. And we love it. And I know that you also support individuals who are also interested in being part of the comic book industry and really kind of honing your skills. So you're with Comic Pro Bootcamp as well. So that's another piece of things that we want to call out. So this was a boot camp you guys created for really artists interested in taking their skills to the next level, right? Can you tell us just a little bit about that as well?
Sure. There's 4 of us, Will Portacio, Ryan Benjamin, Carlos Deanda, and myself. And we kind of got together and wanted to teach artists about drawing comic books or comic book style art. And we started an in-person boot camp, and it was a 3-day boot camp. We came out, we taught you, kind of gave you an assignment, much like you would get from a company, and then we guide you through that. And so we take you from the concept to the layout, to the sketch, to the pencils, inks, and the colors, to kind of try and get you, to get what it feels like to be a freelance artist, get that assignment. And sometimes we do get that, phone call on Friday, and that's hey, we need a cover for Batgirl on Monday. Can you pull it off? And we've been known to be really bad at saying no as freelancers. And so we kind of put them through that grinder, and at each phase that they complete, we come in with the critique process, because that's what you go through. You send your layouts to the editor kicks back with comments or redraw requests and stuff like that. And so we come in as an editor basically and put them through that little bit of a grinder. That's what we call it, a boot camp. With COVID, we went online, and we've created a course load that allows us to still have that personal interaction, in that we teach live. It's not recorded. We give you an assignment, and then we review the assignment a couple days later. So you still get that one-on-one interaction with us. And we actually, last night we had a phone call. We're bringing it back in person, and we're trying to nail down a date for our first one that's going to come back in person. So we're excited. I loved being around all these artists. It's so inspiring to see young artists just kind of draw without too much of the self-deprecating.
Yeah. And you know, and Wacom's really aligned with you, right? So as an organization, we want to help young artists across the way. So if you guys want to learn more about Comic Pro Bootcamp, Kristen, who's on from the Wacom team, will be sharing the link in the chat here so you guys can learn more. If there's other ways that you guys are thinking about supporting young artists, Wacom is always interested in hearing about that. We work with schools, we work with artists like Alex, we bring in mentorships, we work with industry partners. It's all about supporting the creative arts, right? It's all about getting everybody access to something that gives them passion. And as we all know, that I love to say is art saves lives, right? There's always a reason that we're artists because there's something about us that makes it beautiful. So thank you for sharing about that, Alex. Before we go into our agenda, gang, I am going to share a little bit of housekeeping stuff as well. So as you've probably heard me say, we are going to be using the chat feature a lot for this. We want to hear what's going on. Also, we're going to be giving away some products during this webinar. So the way that you get entered to win is use the chat. So everyone who's here live today, if you participate, whether it's telling us where you're from, what your superpower would be, what some of your key tips and tricks are, asking questions of Alex and I throughout the webinar, any of those things will be help you get entered to win. So please utilize the chat. Again, Kristen from the Wacom team is in there as well to answer any questions that are specific to technical stuff or little things about Wacom or how to find links. Also, make sure you guys hear this. We are recording this webinar as well. So please don't worry about taking notes. Don't worry about trying to scribble everything down because Alex is going to share a ton of insight. You'll get this after our presentation. We'll send it out. And when we send out that recording, we're also going to be announcing the winners of the drawing. So I'm so excited. Alex is earning one. Wacom's earning one. We're just excited to be doing this for you guys because, hey, who doesn't love Wacom product, right? I think that's where we're at. So good. Okay. So let's talk really quick what we're going to talk about today. Are you ready to dive into the meat of our conversation? So today we're going to go over micro moments, and Alex, I know we'll talk a little bit more about what that is here in a minute. As you guys see on our computer, or your computer, on the Zoom, you see two screens. You see Alex from two ways, because not only do we love him twice, but we also want to make sure you can see his workstation. So he's going to be talking about the tools and the breakdown of the customization and his workstation, things like that. You'll see we'll pin his screen at kind of the main presentation one of his workflow. He can talk through that with us today. We're going to talk about your best practices, right? How do you prioritize and what that looks like and why, right? That's probably a big part of this, is really helping that. And then we'll talk about forming workflow habits and tricks that stick, and some of how you've done that and how you test things out and all of your thought behind that. And then we'll make sure that we leave some time at the end to talk about any other tips and tricks and any questions that we may have coming in. So Alex, let's talk really quick. Micro moments. What is that for you?
Well, micro moments is the term that kind of applied to it as we were working to create an efficient workflow. You know, a lot of things were taken into account in the past. I mean, I've been working with Photoshop since it was in version 2.0, and I know that dates me. So there were a lot of things that weren't available for Photoshop, but as stuff was being introduced to the program, we were realizing that they were adding elements to the program that would help people work faster, not have to rely on things like a keyboard and things like that. So hotkeys was probably the first micro moment, kind of aha moment that we got, in that instead of being on your page and then having to slide over to the toolbar and select a different tool, you can just hit one key on the keyboard, and that would immediately take you to that. And so that you saved that movement and replaced it with a single strike with your finger. And so that was, I think, the beginning of these realizations that we could really eliminate some of those micro moments to speed up the output of our work. And in an industry where you get paid per page, doing more pages means you get paid more money. And in an environment where you have to turn around a book in a very short period of time, you know, you're always looking for I need to do this as fast as possible. And not only because it means I get more, I can do more, it means I can finish it faster. I can hit that deadline. And so working in a studio environment, it was great in that we were all kind of feeding off each other and trying to, hey, did you realize that command this will do that? And then command S saves, so that you don't have to go up there and click and drag down and save. And I actually kind of had to live through this yesterday. I did a stream for a friend, and he works on a PC, and I'm a very, very, very Mac person.
Yeah.
So I don't know the hotkeys for the PC because they don't have an option key.
Oh, no.
And so I used a lot of the drop menus, and I was kind of thrown back to that time when that's all we did, because that's all we thought was available. And so over the years, certain things got introduced, and so companies start creating gaming pads for gamers, so that they could play faster in games and be better at the games than the other people playing the games. And we adapted those for working on comic book pages, and reprogrammed those keypads with what we were using on the keyboard, or on the on our keyboard. And that meant that we no longer had to look down to the keyboard to find the keys, because even though we're saving a little bit of time in hand movement, there's still a glance to the keyboard to find the keys, since it's such a large keyboard. And so we're trying to kind of minimize that space. And it was until recently that the gaming pad that I was using wasn't being supported by the manufacturer anymore. And so I turned to Wacom and the EK remote, and started programming buttons there. And then the on-screen controls, I started creating more on-screen controls that would then, I minimized the space that I use from the computer, the screen, and the gaming pad to, my Cintiq. And so my hand rests on my EK remote, and my other hand is drawing at the same time. And so that there's little to no movement off of this space. And so that I'm cutting away enough micro moments that I'm really saving myself a lot of time in the long run. And so that there's that's, I think, for efficiency, for maximum output, identifying what those micro moments are that you're taking that you can reduce will lead to a more efficient work output.
Yeah, right. And because we do have to sleep, we can't automatically recharge. You don't have that superpower, right? We do need to think about all the things that take out time wasting moments, right? Those micro moments, so that you can be more productive and get more sheets done and keep the flow up, which is amazing, right? That's awesome.
Right.
So everybody's been looking at your screen. Everybody's excited about what you're doing. So I'm going to stop sharing here, gang, and we're going to let Alex be our main view here so you guys can see. So Alex, let's talk about really your tools. And you mentioned a little bit about some of your customization here. So you are sharing your Cintiq screen, which is amazing. You can see whatever he's working on, guys. This is so cool that we get to see your art. By the way, this is like where we all geek out a little bit on this. This is awesome. So thank you. So why don't you talk about your setup?
And so, like I mentioned, it's all kind of sitting here so that I don't have to worry too much about it. The setup is, the Cintiq is the main workspace. I keep all my Photoshop palettes on the same screen as the art that I'm using, because the screen's large enough that I can manage both on the same screen. It reduces the amount of movement that I have to do. My EK remote's over here. My left hand is resting on it, and through the use and practice of it, the muscle memory that I built because of that has gotten to the point where I don't look for the keys anymore. My fingers kind of know where to go. And then I also have, if I can pop them up here, I have on-screen menus that I pop up. I use coloring modes, which is one of the things that I change a lot in when I'm painting. I also use something like numbers that allows me to change the opacity of the brush that I'm using, or the opacity of the layer that I'm working with. And so that keeps me from having to look over at the keyboard, finding the number that I want. It's really a double click, I find the number, and I'm there already. And my pen stays within the area that I'm going to be painting anyway. There's other things that I have, different rendering modes, the quick mask, paste into, copy, paste, all that kind of stuff. I have created different elements that that I had in the gaming pad that didn't fit in the EK remote, but that I was able to solve by putting here because I don't use them as much. And so the keys that I use the most are on the EK remote, and that's because I can change tools or modes or, you know, all these things that I do a lot on the fly with my left hand. And so that I'm kind of continuously moving through the page as I go. And they also have extra little things on the side here that I kind of pinned. This is another on-screen display that I pinned that can be turned off or back on depending. And then the last element that I use is the Intuos Pro Small, and that's over here. And it's one of the newest finds that I've brought into my workflow. That's something that I've been working with you guys with, is that I'm able to, in the event that I'm working and on my iMac, which is up here, I get an email, I need to respond to it, I need to click a link to a website or something. My hand goes straight to the Intuos, and I'm already navigating on that. And I can do everything with it. It has a touch function, so even if I don't have the pen in my hand, I can use it like a trackpad. And so for this, I programmed
there we go.
The tab function, so I can switch applications if I have to.
Yeah. And that's amazing, that flexibility, right? So that, again, it's almost preventing even more micro moments, right? You don't have to like put down your stuff, turn, interact a response that you need, and then hopefully put your pen in the right spot and not drop it on the floor, and like keep moving, right? It's like all the things, right? So you never put your pen down because of that workflow. Like, you're keeping everything set up. And I think the way that you have those radial dials is amazing. You know, just the transparency ones, all the quick buttons.
Yeah.
I'm imagining when you work, it's almost like you're making music, you're orchestrating a sound, like you know all the ways of just kind of hitting all the buttons, right?
Yeah. My wife made a comment. She said, "What happened to your clicky machine?" Because when I got rid of the programmable keypad, the EK remote is a lot more silent, and there's less movement from my hand. So I couldn't tell if you're working anymore because I don't hear the clickety clickety clickety. And that's how much movement there's going on with my left hand. My what is it, dexterity?
Dexterity,
dexterity in my left hand has increased so much because of that. Working with a Wacom really shot my hand-eye coordination through the roof, and then using these peripherals now has increased the dexterity in my left hand.
Well, and the Cintiq has 20 points of touch, right? I don't know why we have 20 points of touch, because like never are we gonna have two hands on a Cintiq, right? Or maybe feet, but it's the beauty. You can have your hand moving things and your pen at the same time. And on the Intuos, like, you do have that really gorgeous workflow.
Yes.
That's awesome, right? So
and so now my pen I don't put it down enough to. It used to go in my mouth, and that was it, right? It's in my mouth, trackpad, moving things around, back, and now it's great because then I don't lose those moments, you know.
Yeah.
And so it definitely has when I thought that I was fast enough or efficient enough, there's always something that pops up. Hey, did you know about this? Hey, did you know about that? And so it's cool to interact with folks and then find out, oh wow, I've never tried that with my work setup.
I love that. I love that so much. So when you think about some of the ways that made you think through some of the customization, right? Like, of what did that, what was the biggest kind of, I don't want to say so what, but like, what were some of the things that you were like, okay, we set up a system like this, we did this, we're working on the shortcuts. How did you learn this, right? How did you kind of learn the new way of setting up? How did you practice putting that into your workflow? Like, what were some of the things that you did to kind of be like, yeah, this is worth adding in, or, oh no, this is going to make it more complicated for me? How did you do some of that?
Yeah, it's a lot of kind of paying attention to how you work. And so I was paying attention to, okay, what tools am I using the most? Okay, what functions, what modifier keys do I use the most? All those little things that I was really paying attention to, like, okay, I really use the brush tool, I really use the bucket tool, I really use the lasso tool, I use the wand tool. And those are the 4 keys that are shooting right down the middle on my EK remote, because I toggle between those a lot. And so those are always there. the space bar. And so as I was working, I was making notes. Okay, you know, like almost in my mind, making little like tick marks every time I used one of them, knowing that, okay, I need to program these keys for sure. And then
Yeah.
kind of watching myself working, okay, I'm reaching for this more than I thought I was. And so I'm going to replace the, you know, the marquee tool with the save tool now instead. And so it really was about a process of a week or so of just kind of paying attention to what I was doing, knowing, okay, I want to minimize the time that I'm spending switching with these specific things that I'm touching. And so that I'm containing those two within the workflow that I'm using within my Wacom products and my computer. And so little by little, you know, kind of programming everything as I go, and then really just doing it, you know, trusting that I need to repeat the process to create that muscle memory. And so that I'm always, I mean, I'm on my machine at least 8 hours a day, you know, 5 to 6 days a week, maybe more sometimes. And so the muscle memory really comes out of necessity, and then doing it over and over. And so when they say practice makes perfect, practice also makes you not have to think about certain things. And so that is I think the ultimate thing that you want is your body doing things that it's almost like an instinct that you're doing it instead of thinking it and doing it. Your body's actually just doing it as you're doing something else. And so it's that repetition, that practice, that keep doing it. That, you know, when people ask, what do I need to do to be a better artist? You just draw every day. You got to draw every day, because if you fight the desire to draw every day, then maybe drawing's not what you want to do, right? There's days when I turn the computer off and I don't come back to it, and I can hear it calling to me. And maybe that's just my head, but
you're like, there's something I need to do. Well, and I think too, when you're in that creative flow, you don't want to be making little decisions of like, do I need to do this? Do I need to do this? Right? You want to be focused on what you're creating. You want to be focused on the like emotion and the art of what you're doing in that piece. And so by having that kind of it's like the routine, right? You don't have to make those little mini decisions, because your hand knows what to do, everything is to do, so you can stay really immersed in what you're working on. And that probably increases your speed, also increases not only just the feel too, and the consistency of what you're doing as you move from page to page, right? Because you're kind of staying in that moment. And that, you know, I think that's part of one of your talents, is that you're so good at keeping the emotion of how you're adding color and what you're telling in the story very consistent, right? I think that's one of those things that makes it a production, you know, an artist like you really unique, is that you can keep in that moment, you can keep in that mood, you can kind of see all that stuff that you're doing. And so I think it's amazing that you do that over and over. Also, like you said, the faster you are, the more money you make, right? So that's also another way to kind of really get the speed down, and to find those shortcuts, and to find the way that you can kind of increase your workflow, so that you're able to create more in that moment too.
Correct.
Okay, so one of the things we're going to talk about is like kind of prioritizing. We've talked about this a little bit, like prioritizing your best practices, right? So like if you have to think about really making this a priority, right? And you're really kind of making your key things a priority. One, we talked a little bit, but like why is that so crucial, other than what we just talked about? Is there anything else? And then two, when you're giving artists tips to kind of learn to make sure they're prioritizing their best practices, how do you help them kind of teach that? Like whether it's in your boot camp or you're kind of, you know, coaching new artists, like what do you say to say, this is what you guys need to do for your best practices?
I think, and it all just kind of, when it comes to art, you know, people is like, what do you emphasize? And that's, you know, I think one of the things that I love about teaching is that it makes you go back to the fundamentals. And so it's that core set of ideas or concepts or techniques that you learned as a young artist, or when you first started drawing, that build up to what you're doing now. And so that the more you repeat them, the more they just become second nature to you. And so that, I think that translates to working physically, in that, you know, it's the efficiency of how you move around a page, having a workflow like this allows me to just focus on what I'm doing so that I can stay in that moment, like you were talking about. It's so important to be able to turn around work at a certain rate, but it's also more important, especially as a colorist, is to be consistent in my work so that I'm also helping tell that story, and any kind of change in the consistency of it or the storytelling aspects of it, any change that I do that affects the story adversely, that's something that I want to cut out of my uh, process. And so I think it's the work ethic plus the adherence to the fundamentals that really does help you be a very efficient artist, efficient worker. I think it translates to not just art, but if you're an athlete, it goes to that, right? And we all kind of have different skill sets that apply for what we do, and I think that can translate to any job that you're doing, or a hobby even. You can take that hobby into something professional by just pushing yourself to that next level.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And we've got some people in the chat too are all sorts of things, right? We've got artists who've been doing this for, I think someone said 25 years. They've been on Wacom products. We've got people who are self-teaching right now as well, right? And I think that's to the point, right? It's just that practice, right? It's getting in the flow. It's that practice. It's the consistency. It's building that muscle memory. And it's also trying things, right? Like it's trying new things. So I know you just tried a new technique, right? That I think we sent you. We're like, hey, try this. What do you think, right? And so when someone says, hey, you should try this, what's your process to say, does this fit into my workflow? Do I like this? Is it going to help me? Like, how do you think about that?
I'm always open to try things. I'm always open to like, well, okay, how will this be better? Will this be worse? But I'm always willing to try it, because if it's going to help me, then I definitely want it, right? And so as much as I said, watch yourself, program everything, muscle memory, always keep that little door open of like, oh, wait, what do you mean you have a pen that has 3 buttons? Like, wait, why don't I have a pen with 3 buttons?
Right.
And so, and the joke became like, well, what the heck am I going to put on that button? Because it's now become a very important button. And so the process in my head kind of went through again. It's like, okay, because I can program, this into the button, and that means that I have an opening on the EK remote, and I can program that into and so you kind of get excited about it, because you're like, oh, I just added an extra, I just cut out another micro moment out of my work. And so always on the lookout for stuff like that, and I'll Google things like that. What's is there a short keyboard shortcut for this or for that? Someone in the chat is mentioning actions. I have, if you look on my screen here, I have rows and rows of actions that Photoshop will just immediately take me from one thing to the other and finish it. So when I finish a page, I have to trap it, and that's a printing term that means that the color gets pinched onto the black, so that if the plate in old school printers, plate printers, if that black plate shifts, if you have a little bit of color pinched underneath it, you won't see a halo. So on these old comic books, you used to see these little halos of color every now and then. And that's because the pages weren't trapped, because that wasn't something that could be done back then. And so Photoshop, being the program that it is, has some, we wrote a set of actions that allows us to pinch that color and trap it. Gives you a nice, rich, consistent black throughout too. And so, really optimizing comic books visually for the reader.
And that's awesome. And I think that's a really cool way to talk about some of the, those best practices, is like the things that you need to do every day, right? Like the things that for every piece you need to have it. There's 10 steps or 30 steps or 40 steps you've got to do. It is figuring out, how do I keep that right there, ready to go and do it. And then if you don't know those steps, probably write them down, walk through, take a day, right? And like walk through, what are you doing, so that you're tracking all of it. Like you said, keep people aware of what you're doing, but mark it down and things like that. And I think you're right? YouTube, Google, those are all really great places to learn some tips and tricks out there for different commands. How can you do this faster? I think you're right, that kind of hunger for curiosity too, of like, how do I keep wanting to do something better, right? How do I keep learning a new skill? Is a great thing, because I think that's what keeps stuff fresh, right? And
I agree.
relevancy, right?
That-
And you
That's
don't
a
want to atrophy, right? As an artist, as an athlete, you don't want to atrophy a skill or atrophy something because you're not paying attention to what you could be doing different, or a different technique, right? That's
yeah, and you used the perfect word for it, hunger. You gotta want it. You gotta just something drives you, right? It's in, like I said, sometimes it feels like it's a sickness. It's like I need to figure this out. I need to make this better. I need to make this faster. I need to this, something about the workflow isn't clicking, and you just kind of in your head you're trying to figure it out to perfect it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I think that word's perfect, because it's I think what drives many of the successful artists, athletes, business folks, they're always kind of looking for a better way to do it.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes into like our fourth point of what we were talking about today, is like making those best practices that stick, right? So then it's figuring this out, and then how do you make a new thing stick? What do you do to make sure you're like, okay, I'm going to try this? How do you do it? And when do you decide to try something new, right? When in your workflow are you like, oh yeah, I should try something new? Is it the middle of the project, beginning of the project, end of project? How do you decide how to make that a best practice?
Well, I definitely don't do it right before or during like a crazy deadline, because
Yeah.
obviously I need to get the work done. And when I see a kind of gap in the schedule, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do it now. I'll do it now, and then pick up. Maybe it's a cover that's due next that I don't have such a harsh deadline with, and that way, even if I'm stumbling through what I've just added to my workflow, I'm discovering how much time it's saving me, or how much easier it's making it for me to do the work. And so I definitely. There's definitely a time and place to do it, and you want to make sure that you do it at the appropriate time. I was chatting with a friend earlier today, and we both ordered a different peripheral months ago. It was through Kickstarter, and he said, "Oh, I think it comes this month." And I told him, "I don't think I'm going to use it. I don't think I'm going to actually incorporate it. I'm really happy with the workflow as it is right now. I don't want to mess with it." And so, there's, like I said, a time and a place, and I think I'm going to let him be the guinea pig on this one. Have him get back at me and see what that does. But I'm actually really happy with this kind of workflow setup that I have, and it's I like that it's all, I'm just using a Mac, Photoshop, and Wacom products, and that's it. That's the only thing that I'm so I'm minimizing the amount of drivers that are coming into play too, and so that my computer is more efficient because it's not running as much memory on it. And so it's, things that you might not think about that really do play into your the efficiency. We joked about the computer not being able to keep up with someone who's got super speed.
Exactly.
You want, you definitely want to keep that that computer happy, that computer running smoothly, and minimizing the amount of applications you're running at that point.
Exactly. And I know the questions have come in, right? So you've got the Cintiq Pro 24 Touch. You've got the Intuos Pro as well. You've got the Pro Pen 2, which is got the 3D buttons on it. And then your Mac setup. What do you got? Do you know?
So I'm running an iMac 27-inch. It's the 2014 late model. I actually got my email this morning that my Mac Studio is showing up in June, and so I'm gonna upgrading to the new toy, and so again, talking about faster machine, faster everything, which will help. Mine was a little more induced by my iMac crashing a couple of weeks ago.
Oh no!
And spending about 26 hours bringing it back to life, but it's back.
And then you've got a new one coming.
So we're treating this one nicely so it can last till June.
yeah, right. I think that's always a hard part, right? Of like when we're talking, equipment, it's hard because you rely on these tools so heavily, right? And it's making it so that you can really dive in and work and focus on what you're doing, what you rely. Yeah, I definitely get that. Okay, so before we kind of go into opening it for questions for folks to talk about some of the things, I know they're asking you a lot of things. Are there any kind of best practices or tips that you want to show right now you're like, hey, here's one thing that I do that like is a unique thing that you think kind of you set up? Is there anything on there that you're like, got to show this tool, got to show this tip?
It's actually a tip that I got from you guys a couple months back, and that I didn't realize. I was using the bracket keys to make the brush size larger and smaller. And that took up 2 buttons. And so that on my EK remote, I was using 2 buttons and I was just clicking them back and forth. And I think that's probably the 2 buttons that I hit the most are that, because my brush, I'm always adjusting the size of the brush depending on how I'm painting. And then someone said, hey, well, if you do, and I think it's Control Option at the same time, it activates the brush size and you can size it on the fly.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I have it set up so that the brush is visible and I can see what size the brush is and then go from there. And so that's, I think that's my favorite one, in that I can immediately see the brush size that I'm doing. I can take it to the size that I want to. And it saved me another button on the EK remote. And run. And so I think that's been like my latest discovery. It's been my favorite discovery. It's probably what's going to go on that button, the third button on the pen.
Yeah, I like it.
Because it's now become, you know, my finger rests, when I draw, my finger rests where that button is. So I'm starting to get accustomed to spinning the stylus so that I don't hit the button inadvertently.
I think that's what I like. And I know that sounds so silly. When I joined Wacom, that was my biggest error. Like accidentally hitting the button because I was holding the pen too tight because I was used to writing. And I'm one of those people who probably writes too hard, right? And so it's getting adjusted to it. When you learn that new trick with the brackets, how long do you think it took you to get it got used to being in your workflow? It wasn't no longer, it was muscle memory. Was that a day, 2 days, a week? How long do you think it took you to kind of incorporate that into no longer a decision-making piece?
I think within a week, I use it that much. And so, you know, I think it was weird to unlearn that. And learn one button now, it means you can move the slider, or you can, you know, increase and decrease size. And I think that took a little bit longer because I had to unlearn 2 fingers to move the brush, and it was just not 1 finger. But I'm happy to just use the 1 finger now.
You're like, less is good, right? Less is more on this one. I love that. I love that so much. We have had great participation in the chat, guys, and I appreciate everything you guys are coming in. Really quick, I'm going to share. Well, Alex, I think your art's way prettier than my slide, even though there's another piece of your art on here. But I know that everybody loves seeing your stuff. So we've talked through kind of why we want to reduce micro moments today and what that looks like. We've talked about your tools and kind of knowing them, and what that, you know, what we need to do that to be really effective, right? To be more speedy and to get more done. We've talked about the prioritization, right? How do you prioritize what you're doing and adding things to your workflow and what that looks like? We've talked about how to really kind of form new habits and what you're looking to do and why you do it, and some of the things that you think about when it's coming to new habits, and then embracing change, right? I think that's our biggest one, right? That we talked about today. I think that's, as an artist, as a human, right? We have to embrace change, and that's part of it. And I think you can probably talk a little bit too of just being in the industry for almost 30 years. You've probably seen a lot of change come and go, right?
Yes, I mean, especially when I came in, it was the digital color was such in its infancy that we were literally trying to figure out how to get Photoshop to work as a coloring medium, because there was many things that weren't available in Photoshop at that point. So there were no layers, no multiple undos. Quick mask was not even a thing. Some of the tools were in there. So the lasso tool was just a lasso. There was no magnetic lasso. There was no fancy lasso or that lasso, or the paintbrush was just a brush. So there was no paint mixer. So you had to really adapt Photoshop to be more of a painting tool. Over the years, it's become just that. I think I consider Photoshop another medium for painting, much like oil and watercolor are, and the purists in art will cringe when I say that, but I do see it that I'd rather take an artist and teach them how to do Photoshop than take a Photoshop expert and teach them how to paint.
Yeah.
Because it's 6 months to learn Photoshop. It's years to learn how to paint. And so I lost my train of thought, sorry.
No, but it's true. But I also think too, if you're thinking about becoming an artist that's a profitable artist, right? Photoshop is the medium that is the most profitable medium to know, right? Not to say my parents were professional glass artists, right? So they're probably gonna cringe if they hear me say this, right? But like, you know, they had a very expensive medium that was heavy and hard to ship and very, very temperamental. And then you had to find the right audience to want to buy it, right? It was definitely one of those things that is a medium that's hard, right? It's beautiful, and obviously all the artists that do glasses are beautiful, but Photoshop is a medium that it's there. You've got so much flexibility. You can do so many things, right? And you can monetize it in so many ways, right? That's the beauty of it, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely think that's great. Okay, are you ready? The audience, we've got almost 200 people on with us today, which is amazing.
Awesome.
They have been sending so many questions in, and I'm going to open up the panel. You know, I think
Do you want me
one
to
of
start
the
sharing?
yeah, well, I think they might. This one right here might be one that you might want to share your screen for. But one question that came in is like, what's your favorite thing to draw or to color, or like, what's your favorite type of art to do?
Oh,
Other than comic books, that's the generic answer. But
right. And so when I draw for myself or I paint for myself,
yeah,
it's going to be wildlife.
oh,
I'm also illustrating a children's book right now, and so that I'm really enjoying that. And when I do paint for myself, I like the chaotic medium. So watercolor, pastels, charcoals, stuff that I can't control, stuff that makes me kind of react, because when I'm in Photoshop, I can control everything 100% of the time. And I know exactly how to manipulate it and stuff like that. So I like mediums that really just challenge me. And so watercolor is great. Animals, I love to do it because I work with human features and bodies all day, every day. And so that, you know, the last thing I want to draw is just Batman on a gargoyle. And it's not that I don't like it. It's just that I get to do that so much, right? That I'd rather go draw a warthog or paint a warthog or a giraffe or a rhino, because it's oddly shaped and it's got different colors. They're not shiny, leathery colors. And so, so that's kind of where I stand with that. This is one of the pages from the book that I'm illustrating. And so it's awesome. I'm actually working with markers and pencils and watercolors on that. It's kind of making it up as I go, which is kind of what you want to do.
But you can't hit undo, and you don't have all your short keys for everything.
Right.
And you can't hit your brush size on the fly, right? So.
And many times you throw a line, you're like, oh crap, I can't undo.
You're like, oh, okay, this is gonna stay. Produce something
paint
happy
over.
Accident, right? Just happy accidents, as Bob Ross says, right? Exactly.
Yep.
So one of the questions actually came in a couple of times. So someone asked if there's something you could color for us while we're on right now, so they can kind of see your flow, just how you're moving your hands, if you're comfortable with that.
And we can even take this and kind of recolor part of it if you want.
Yeah, let's do a little bit, guys. We're gonna zoom in. This is special behind the scenes, master in action here. So great questions to those who have asked. And it's fascinating to see how you do it. And you know, I will admit I'm not an artist, so watching you do work is just always, it's amazing too. So
kind of my process is I always start with the actual color, and even though what you saw before I did this, it was washed in color. So I always start with the exact same colors for all the characters, and I have palettes that are for each character in here. And so I have a Venom palette, I have a Han Solo and Chewbacca palette, and so that they always get the exact same color to start off with, so that there's a consistency there. And then what I'll do is depending on the environment and the ambient lighting, I'll take that color and I'll wash it over. And so I'm going to sample this kind of bluish green off the sky, go into normal mode, and then just kind of wash that with that color. And so now it looks like it's in that environment. And then I'll take the highlight color that I've been using for this, and then I'll switch my color modes. This is where the radial kind of menus come into play. and
Yeah.
that I can change the different modes, and switch brushes.
Amazing.
And little by little, it's kind of like almost like sculpting, as I'm kind of carving
Yeah.
a little bit at a time to reveal the different, the musculature or different features if it's a face. I'm just kind of painting my way.
That's awesome. And again, you can all of a sudden now you see just that so much more texture in it. And you can really see just the highlights and the features and just the shape so much more. It's crazy how quickly you can do that.
Yeah, and in just that face, I saved myself 2 undos, what was it? Fill in, 4 mode changes, the zooming in and out, and the hiding of the selection. And that all kind of came and went through the programming of the EK remote and the on-screen displays and the kind of pin tool set that I have on the side. And so that those were things that I would have had to move around or use multiple hands or multiple keystrokes to do. They're all kind of programmed in and done. So I saved, I think I saved myself doing just that face enough that I would have been able to do 2 different faces in the time it would have taken me to do the one. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's 2 for 1, right? So you're cutting it down by half, just the short keys and all of that. And I think some of your process too, right, of having, like you said, the fundamentals. So you start with the same baseline for every single one.
Right.
So you're keeping that consistency. I think
Correct.
that's probably definitely a best practice that you probably instill in everybody, right? Is just start with a consistent palette and moving forward.
Yeah, and the new Photoshop color palette is very conducive to that, and that you have to delete and import palettes in the past, and now that you can all just kind of link them here and have them all, and you just kind of open up the one that you're going to use next.
I love that. I love that. So one of the questions that came in is like, what is your favorite brush to use?
I probably used and if you look on my screen here, they're numbered, and so 1 and 1.5 are the ones. And so it used to go from 1 to 20. There was no 1.5, and halfway through it, I discovered a triangular brush in Procreate on my iPad that I really liked, and I thought, I can just take my regular square marker brush, and create one that's a triangle, and it creates really cool angles, and that's why I like it. And so instead of renumbering everything, I just made it 1.5 in my list.
I like it. And again, that's a shortcut, right? That's a best practice of like knowing your workflow of how you move through and then finding ways to shorten time, right? So you can fit it into a workflow.
Correct. Yeah, and that was the thing. So those are the ones that I use for painting the most. Obviously, there's if I'm doing rock, there's about 4 or 5 brushes that I use that the initial texture, then there's sort of texture that I can actually wrap a little bit more, and then there's speckles for the nicks and the cuts into the stone, and so you see a lot of those in something like this, where this is the product of about 6 or 7 different brushes. And so that I'm not happy just using one brush to do one thing. It's much like sculpting or painting. You layer it and you layer and you layer, and that's what gives you the realistic output. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's so cool, right? And I think it's really fascinating to see just how that, as you build it, right? As you build that layer, you just so much more life comes to it, to everyone.
Right.
So one of the other questions, it says I think it's kind of there's a couple questions that are kind of similar. I'm going to combine them.
Sure.
And it is, one, who is the favorite project you worked on? And part B of that is, whose project do you want to work on someday? So if you got to pick,
Wow.
I know it's a hard one. It's a hard one.
Which one of your children do you love the most? That's basically what I'm being asked. I love them all equally. I think, and the one project that I'm known for the most was, I think, one that really put my name on the map. Was Batman Hush. And so when people ask, what have you done? And I say Batman Hush, it's always like, oh. And so I think, that's definitely one of my favorites. There's been many, many more, because I've gotten to work with so many talented artists that I'm so thankful and humbled by. And so that these guys choose to ask for me to work with and collaborate, so that working with them has made me a better artist. And so that's something that I'm grateful to all of them for. And so that's why it's so hard for me to say it's one, because there's a list of about 10 that are lined up right behind that one, right?
Yeah. You're 1.1.5, you're 1.7.
That's right. 1.55.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And who I would love to work with, I'm actually starting to. I was exclusive with DC Comics up until 2019, and then I decided not to sign an exclusive with them. And so I've been working with Marvel now, and so I'm working on characters that I've never worked on professionally. That is so incredible to me. I'm working in the Star Wars universe and enjoying the heck out of that.
Yeah.
But there's artists that have been with just Marvel for years that I would love to eventually collaborate with. And so my bucket list of people that I want to work with, there's still some names on it that I'd love to check off. And so a lot of them were, I can't work with them because they're exclusive to Marvel. And so that I'm hoping to kind of slowly, check off a few more names on that list. And it's like, much like what's your favorite project? Who would you want to work with the most? I think I'm happy to be patient and let the opportunities come to me and embrace whoever it is that I get to work with, because there's a ton of talented folks there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's some crazy cool things coming out right now, and I think there's a lot of really cool young artists that are starting to come up as well, right? I mean, some of the stuff that we're seeing get into the marketplace, some of the young talent that's there, probably some of the folks you've seen in your boot camps, you're just like probably blown away if you're like, wow, this is amazing talent.
Nothing motivates you to work harder than a young punk that's outdoing you.
You're like, hold on, let me do that better. Yeah.
It's like, oh man, how old is he? Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also kind of the beauty too of this medium, is that because you can work on it on a younger age, right? It's more accessible, right? You have more people who are getting access to it, and they can watch videos of you working. They can watch videos of lots of other artists working. They can join webinars like this, right? And start learning at a younger age, where traditional art, you couldn't go find a studio. At least, I mean, granted, I had artist parents, so it's a little bit different, but like most people didn't have access to like a studio to go learn art in, or having artists come around all the time to help train them, right? You didn't have multiple people in your community who was like, hey, sit down and I'll show you how to paint today, right? Like It wasn't really a thing.
Right. So I mean, I think it's very conducive to people saying, well, I'm going to try it then, which is great, because there's so many people that I meet. Oh, I couldn't draw a stick figure if you asked me to. And I tell people, I think everybody can draw. You just have to get past that initial fear of your first stick figure is going to suck. And the more you practice it, you're going to be an awesome stick figure artist. And, then you progress to the realistic figure artist, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, we've got time for one more question. So, folks, we've got people from all over throwing stuff in. So again, remember to be entered in to win a Intuos Pro from Alex or Intuos Pro from Wacom. You've got to participate either in the chat or put a question in to the Q&A panel. And there are so many good questions in here. I am trying to think about the best one. I think one of them would be, let's see, there's a lot of questions on man. I think if you had to give new artists one tip to be successful, right? If you could say, hey, this is one thing I wish I had learned earlier in my career, what would it be?
When you show your work and you're getting critiqued, we get so hung up on the stuff that we need to work on that we forget to listen out for the stuff that they like. So pay attention to that and keep doing that, because that's what's catching their eye, right? And so don't just listen for what you're not doing right. Listen out for what you are doing right, because you want to build on that with the stuff that you need to work on. And so, I for years, when I was trying to break into the industry, I would show my portfolio and I would show pencils, inks, and colors, and we get critique, and the conversation would end with, I really like your colors. It took me a while to realize, oh my God, all these professionals like my colors. I need to do more of that.
Yeah.
And that's how I realized that my specialty is color, and what got me my job way back when.
Way back when. I love that. I think that's great. And I think that's, that's a hard one for all of us, right? Is to take the good out of the feedback, right? I think that's one of the things that is, it's just, it's always a challenge, especially on art, right? When it's something that's so personal to you. But I will admit, if someone criticizes my Excel spreadsheet, I am a little offended. I worked really hard to come up with that formula, you guys. Like, there's a reason behind the math. So yeah, no, I get it.
I've tried doing some, and I respect anyone who can pull those things off. There you go.
Awesome. Everyone who's joined us, thank you so much for it. I'm going to go ahead and share this kind of final slide here. That just has our Q&A slide so that you guys can see it. Alex, this has been, and I'm hoping I'm showing the right thing. I think it is. Alex, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for chatting with me and the time and answering everyone's questions. Everyone who's on, again, thank you so much for joining us. You guys had so many great questions. Some of the ones in there, I know Kristen will follow up, especially on the tech stuff, right? What the setup is, some of the specs around it, what we're working on. I know we've got some other kind of more technical tips and tricks that'll go up in the follow-up with you guys. Again, there will be a recording of this coming out, so you can see Alex's stuff. If you can see what his setup is, you can see more of those tips and tricks if you didn't get notes for it. And Alex, again, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you guys for allowing me to do this. Everybody who joined, thank you so much. I think we'll flash my my Instagram handle. It's Sinccolor, SINCCOLOR, 2 C's in the middle. I will do a post on there. That'll be a Q&A post, so that I know that a lot of you had questions on there that we didn't get to, and so that if we don't get to it here or in the follow-up, post them on there, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can in that specific thread, and so that I really want you to kind of get as much as you can out of this. And so I will probably tonight we'll make that post, and then hopefully answer questions through the weekend. So feel free to head out there and post them there.
Awesome. Thank you again, guys. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Pete, from the Wacom team for being on with us. Appreciate it. Guys, make sure you follow Alex's Instagram, you follow Wacom's Instagram. Keep an eye out from emails from Wacom. We'll have more webinars coming your way. And we are definitely going to have Alex on again to chat with us and to share some more stuff. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your Thursday, except for those in Australia. Happy Friday. And we'll see your faces again soon. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.